There is something haunting about looking at old family photos, especially when you know the story behind the smiles. I am holding one right now from 8 years ago, taken during what I thought would be our new beginning as a blended family. My dad, Marcus, looks genuinely happy, his arm around his new wife, Patricia, while her 15-year-old son, Tyler, stands next to them. I am there, too fresh out of my sophomore year at State University, believing we could all make this work. But sometimes the most beautiful pictures hide the most painful truths, and this photograph represents the last moment before everything fell apart. Before we dive into what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching this from. Drop your location in the comments below. And while you are there, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Trust me, you will want to stick around to find out how a simple ultimatum changed my life forever. Growing up, it was just my dad, Marcus, and me after Mom passed away from cancer when I turned 12. Those 6 years created an unbreakable bond between us. Dad worked double shifts at his accounting firm to make sure I had everything I needed, never missing a baseball game or parent-teacher conference despite his exhaustion. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our Saturday morning pancake traditions. He taught me how to change a tire balance, a checkbook, and treat people with respect. I thought nothing could ever come between us. During my sophomore year at State University studying engineering, I started noticing changes in Dad during our weekly phone calls. He sounded lonely, mentioning how quiet the house felt with me away at college. At first, I felt guilty about leaving him alone, but I also knew he wanted me to get my education and build a good life. What I did not expect was how quickly that loneliness would lead him to seek companionship. That spring, Dad called with excitement I had not heard in his voice since before Mom got sick. He had met someone at work, a woman named Patricia, who managed the front office at his accounting firm. She was divorced with a teenage son named Tyler, and according to Dad, she brought light back into his world. He talked about her laugh, her cooking, how she made him feel young again. I was genuinely happy for him, even though part of me worried about how fast things seemed to be moving. When I came home for summer break, I finally met Patricia and Tyler. She was polished and well-spoken with perfectly styled blonde hair and an infectious smile that lit up every room. Tyler seemed like a typical 15-year-old, maybe a little spoiled, but nothing too concerning. During dinner, Patricia asked thoughtful questions about my studies and future plans, while Tyler mostly stayed glued to his phone. Dad beamed with pride as he watched us all interact, clearly hoping we would become one big happy family. The warning signs were subtle at first. Patricia would make comments about how independent I was, almost too independent for someone my age. She wondered aloud if maybe I was taking advantage of Dad's generosity by letting him pay for my education while I focused only on studying instead of working part-time. These comments always came wrapped in concern, delivered with that same bright smile, making them hard to challenge without seeming defensive or ungrateful. During the wedding planning that summer, I noticed how my input was rarely sought, despite being asked to serve as best man. Patricia had very specific visions for everything from the flowers to the music to the guest list. When I suggested including some of Mom's favorite songs in the ceremony, Patricia's smile tightened slightly as she explained they wanted to focus on their future together, not dwell on the past. Dad agreed quickly, eager to avoid any conflict. Tyler, meanwhile, had started making himself at home in our house during his weekend visits. He would raid the refrigerator without asking leave, his belongings scattered around, and treat our home like his personal hotel. When I mentioned this to Dad, he brushed off my concerns, saying Tyler was just adjusting to having two homes and that I should be more understanding since he was younger and dealing with divorce trauma. The quick engagement after just 6 months of dating should have been another red flag, but Dad seemed genuinely happy for the first time since Mom died. I wanted his happiness more than anything, so I pushed down my reservations and tried to embrace our expanding family. Looking back, I realize I was already starting to lose the battle for my father's attention, but I was too naive to understand what was really happening. When I returned from my junior year, I discovered Tyler had completely taken over my childhood bedroom. My baseball trophies were gone. My model airplane collection had vanished, and even my old desk where I used to do homework had been replaced with gaming equipment. Patricia had redecorated the entire space in Tyler's preferred color scheme, throwing away what she called my old junk, without bothering to ask if any of it held sentimental value. When I confronted Dad about this privately, he seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. Patricia had told him I was too old to care about childhood things, and that Tyler needed a proper room for his weekend stays. She had been so thoughtful, Dad explained, taking care of everything while he was busy with work. The fact that she had made these decisions without consulting either of us somehow escaped his notice. The favoritism became impossible to ignore after that. For Tyler's 16th birthday, Patricia convinced Dad to buy him a brand new Mustang complete with custom rims and a premium sound system. Meanwhile, I was still driving the same 10-year-old Honda Civic that Dad had bought me when I first got my license. When I pointed out this disparity, Patricia sweetly explained that Tyler was still in high school and needed reliable transportation while I already had a perfectly good car that served my needs just fine. Every family gathering became an exercise in patience, as I watched Tyler receive constant praise for mediocre achievements, while my academic success went largely unnoticed. When Tyler brought home a report card full of C's and 1 B-, Patricia organized a celebration dinner at his favorite restaurant. When I made Dean's List that same semester, the accomplishment rated barely a mention during Sunday dinner conversation. Patricia had a talent for reframing every situation to make Tyler look like the victim and me look like the privileged one. When Tyler got suspended for cheating on a test, it became a story about how hard it was for him to adjust to having a stepfamily and how the stress was affecting his performance. When I questioned why I was expected to share my study space with someone who clearly did not value education, I was being selfish and unwilling to make sacrifices for family unity. The financial manipulation started subtly but grew more obvious over time. Patricia would casually mention during dinner how expensive college had become, wondering aloud if it was really fair for one child to consume such a large portion of the household budget when there were two kids to think about now. She would present detailed spreadsheets showing how much my education was costing compared to Tyler's expenses, conveniently leaving out the car payments, designer clothes, and private tutoring sessions that Tyler received. Dad started asking me uncomfortable questions about whether I had looked into scholarships or student loans, suggesting that maybe it was time for me to take more responsibility for my own education. This was particularly painful because he had always promised that paying for my college was his way of honoring Mom's memory, since education had been so important to her. Watching him slowly back away from that promise under Patricia's influence felt like losing him all over again. The systematic exclusion from family activities hurt more than the financial pressure. Holiday traditions that Dad and I had maintained for years suddenly changed to accommodate Tyler's preferences. Our annual fishing trip became a family camping adventure that somehow always revolved around activities Tyler enjoyed. The photo albums that once prominently featured pictures of Mom, Dad, and me were reorganized to emphasize the new family unit, with my presence minimized to make room for more recent shots of Patricia, Tyler, and Dad together. I started feeling like a guest in my own childhood home, walking on eggshells, to avoid upsetting the delicate balance Patricia had created. Every conversation felt loaded with hidden meanings. Every family meal became a minefield of potential conflicts. I began spending more time at the library and with friends, anything to avoid the constant tension and subtle hostility that had infected what used to be my safe haven. My senior year brought everything to a breaking point when my final semester tuition payment became the center of a major family crisis. Patricia had been building her case for months, documenting every expense, and presenting increasingly detailed arguments about fiscal responsibility and fairness. She scheduled a formal family meeting to discuss what she called our household financial priorities, complete with charts and projections that painted my education as an unsustainable burden. During this meeting, Patricia presented her position with the confidence of someone who had been planning this moment for a long time. She argued that continuing to fund my education, while Tyler struggled with his own needs, was creating an unhealthy dynamic that favored one child over another. She had researched student loan options, found part-time job opportunities, and even identified cheaper colleges where I could transfer to finish my degree more affordably. Dad sat quietly through most of this presentation, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions, but never once defending our original agreement or acknowledging the promises he had made to me over the years. I could see him mentally calculating costs and benefits, weighing Patricia's arguments against what he knew was right. The fact that he was even considering her proposal felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. Then Tyler got arrested for drunk driving 2 weeks before my tuition was due, and the family crisis reached a whole new level. The legal fees alone would cost thousands of dollars, not to mention the potential consequences for Tyler's future if he ended up with a criminal record. Patricia was beside herself, with worry crying about how one mistake could ruin her son's entire life and how the family needed to rally around him during this difficult time. This was when Patricia revealed her true masterstroke. She had been setting up this moment for months, positioning Tyler as the vulnerable child who needed protection while painting me as the selfish older brother who cared more about his own ambitions than family loyalty. In her version of events, my college fund represented our family's emergency savings money that should be available when real crises arose rather than being locked away for something as optional as higher education. The ultimatum came during a Sunday family dinner with extended family present, ensuring maximum emotional pressure and social consequences for whatever decision I made. Patricia had invited Dad's brother and sister-in-law, along with her own parents, creating an audience that she knew would influence how the conversation unfolded. She waited until dessert was served and everyone was relaxed, before launching into her carefully prepared speech. She began by talking about what family meant to her, how blessed she felt to have found such a wonderful man who understood the importance of putting children first. She spoke about second chances and forgiveness, about how young people sometimes make mistakes that require family support to overcome. She painted a picture of Tyler as a good kid who had made one error in judgment and now faced consequences that could derail his entire future. Then came the ultimatum itself, delivered with tears in her eyes, and her voice shaking with emotion. The family had a choice to make, she explained. We could stand together and use available resources to help Tyler get the legal representation he needed to minimize the impact of this mistake, or we could prioritize individual wants over family needs and let Tyler face the consequences alone. She made it clear that in her mind, my college fund represented the difference between Tyler getting a second chance and Tyler's life being ruined forever. The way she framed it made refusing seem heartless and selfish. According to Patricia, this was not about taking anything away from me, but about proving that family comes first when someone truly needs help. She suggested that a real son, a real brother, would gladly make this sacrifice to help a family member in crisis. She even offered alternatives like helping me find student loans or allowing me to live at home while attending community college, making it sound like she was being generous in defeat rather than manipulative in victory. Dad's response was the most painful part of the entire evening. He did not immediately support Patricia's position, but he also did not defend me or remind everyone of the promises he had made. Instead, he tried to find a middle ground, suggesting we could take a partial amount from my college fund while exploring other options for the remainder of Tyler's legal costs. He wanted everyone to be happy, everyone to win, without understanding that Patricia had designed this situation so that compromise was impossible. When I calmly refused the ultimatum and explained that I would not sacrifice my education for Tyler's poor choices, Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. She accused me of being jealous of Tyler, of trying to sabotage their family, of manipulating Dad with guilt about my deceased mother. She claimed I had never truly accepted her as part of the family and that my refusal proved I did not consider Tyler a real brother worth helping. The room fell silent as Patricia's true feelings about me came pouring out in front of everyone. She revealed months of resentment and manipulation, admitting that she had always seen me as an obstacle to her perfect family vision. She had been working systematically to turn Dad against me, presenting herself as the reasonable voice of financial responsibility, while painting me as an ungrateful burden who took advantage of my father's guilt and generosity. Dad's choice to support Patricia's position in front of his extended family was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. He chose his new wife's version of family loyalty over the promises he had made to his son and the memory of his first wife. In that moment, I realized that the father I had known and loved was gone, replaced by someone who would sacrifice his own child's future to keep peace in his new marriage. That night, while everyone slept off the tension and drama of dinner, I quietly packed my belongings into my old Honda. I took only what truly belonged to me, leaving behind anything that could be construed as taking advantage of Dad's generosity. I wrote a letter explaining my decision, expressing my love for the man he used to be, and making it clear that I was not running away but choosing to build a life free from manipulation and conditional love. As I drove away at dawn, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and relief. I was losing the only family I had left, but I was also freeing myself from a toxic situation that had been slowly destroying my sense of self-worth and emotional well-being. I had no idea what came next, but I knew it had to be better than staying in a place where my value as a family member depended on how much I was willing to sacrifice for people who saw me as expendable. 8 years have passed since that painful morning when I drove away from everything I had ever known. The journey has not been easy, but it has been worth every struggle and sacrifice along the way. I finished college using a combination of student loans, part-time jobs, and sheer determination, graduating with honors despite the financial pressure and emotional stress of being completely on my own. Building a career as a structural engineer gave me both financial stability and personal satisfaction. I discovered that I was capable of much more than I had ever imagined when I was not constantly defending my right to exist or justifying my dreams to people who saw them as obstacles to their own happiness. Work became my refuge, a place where my contributions were valued and my efforts were rewarded based on merit rather than politics or manipulation. The greatest blessing of these 8 years has been meeting Amanda, my wife of 3 years. She comes from a family that actually functions the way families are supposed to, with genuine love, mutual support, and healthy boundaries. Through her, I learned what real family relationships look like when they are not poisoned by jealousy, competition, or manipulation. Her parents welcomed me with open arms, never making me feel like an outsider or someone who had to earn their acceptance. Amanda is pregnant with our first child, a son we plan to name David after her grandfather. The thought of becoming a father both excites and terrifies me because I want to give my son everything I lost during those final years with Dad. I want him to grow up knowing that his worth is not conditional on what he can provide for others, that his dreams matter as much as anyone else's dreams, and that real love does not come with ultimatums attached. We have built a chosen family of close friends who have been there through every milestone and challenge. These relationships have taught me that family is not always about blood connections, but about people who choose to show up consistently with love, support, and genuine care. The friends who helped me move apartments, celebrated my graduation, stood up in my wedding, and will soon become honorary aunts and uncles to my son, represent the kind of family bonds that cannot be broken by manipulation or selfish agendas. For 8 years, I maintained complete radio silence with Marcus and Patricia. I did not send Christmas cards, make birthday calls, or reach out during holidays. This was not done out of spite or revenge, but out of necessity for my own emotional health and growth. I needed space to heal from the trauma of being systematically rejected by the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, and I needed time to build an identity that was not defined by that pain. Then, 3 months ago, I received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbor who had watched me grow up. She was calling to tell me that Marcus had suffered a heart attack and was in intensive care at the local hospital. Through her, I learned what had happened to the family I left behind, and the picture she painted was both satisfying and heartbreaking in ways I had not anticipated. Tyler never graduated high school, dropping out during his senior year after a series of escalating behavioral problems and run-ins with law enforcement. The drunk driving incident that had triggered the ultimatum was just the beginning of a pattern of poor choices and legal troubles that continued throughout his teenage years and into adulthood. He had struggled with substance abuse, multiple arrests, and an inability to hold steady employment, creating constant stress and financial drain on Marcus and Patricia's marriage. The legal fees and rehabilitation costs had consumed not just my college fund, but most of Marcus and Patricia's savings over the years. Patricia's parents had helped initially, but even they eventually reached their limit when it became clear that Tyler was not responding to treatment or taking responsibility for his actions. The perfect family that Patricia had been so determined to create had become a source of constant crisis and disappointment. Marcus and Patricia's marriage had deteriorated under the pressure of Tyler's problems and their financial struggles. According to Mrs. Henderson, they barely spoke to each other except when necessary, and Marcus had been asking mutual friends about me for over a year. He wanted to reach out, but was too ashamed of his choices and too proud to admit that he had made a terrible mistake in choosing Patricia's ultimatum over his relationship with me. The decision of whether to visit Marcus in the hospital was one of the hardest I had ever faced. Amanda supported whatever choice I made, understanding that this was something I needed to resolve for my own peace of mind, rather than out of any obligation to people who had rejected me. After several sleepless nights of consideration, I decided that I owed it to the man who had raised me to at least give him a chance to speak his piece. Walking into that hospital room was surreal. After 8 years of complete separation, Marcus looked older, frailer, diminished by illness and regret, in ways that shocked me. When he saw me, tears immediately filled his eyes, and he struggled to speak around the emotion that overwhelmed him. His first words were an apology acknowledgement that he had failed me as a father when I needed him most, and that he had allowed Patricia to manipulate him into betraying everything he had promised me and my mother. We talked for over 2 hours that day, with Marcus explaining how gradually Patricia had poisoned him against me, while making it seem like she was just looking out for the family's best interests. He described how she would present selective information, interpret my actions in the worst possible light, and slowly convince him that I was taking advantage of his guilt and generosity. He admitted that he had wanted to believe her version of events because it was easier than confronting the possibility that his new wife was systematically destroying his relationship with his son. Marcus told me about the years of regret that followed my departure, how he had wanted to reach out but felt too ashamed of his choices to face me. He had watched Patricia's promises about Tyler prove false over and over again, while the son he had rejected went on to build a successful life without any help or support from the family that should have been there for him. He understood now that Patricia had never wanted a blended family, but had wanted to replace me entirely with her own son. When Patricia arrived at the hospital later that afternoon, the dynamic immediately shifted back to the old patterns of manipulation and control. She was syrupy sweet to me at first, acting as though our 8-year separation had been some sort of mutual misunderstanding, rather than the direct result of her ultimatum. She quickly began steering the conversation toward Tyler's latest crisis, a pending court case that could result in serious jail time, and how wonderful it would be if our family could finally come together to support him during this difficult period. I listened to her entire pitch with the detached interest of someone observing a performance rather than participating in a family discussion. Patricia had not changed at all during these 8 years. She was still the same manipulative person who saw relationships as transactions and family members as resources to be deployed for her benefit. The only difference was that now I could see her tactics clearly, instead of being confused and hurt by them. When she finished her appeal for Tyler, I calmly explained my position with the clarity that comes from years of distance and perspective. I told Patricia that I had built a successful life without their family's support, and that I had no interest in being drawn back into the dysfunction that had poisoned my relationship with my father. I made it clear that while I was willing to rebuild a relationship with Marcus based on honesty and mutual respect, I had no intention of becoming involved with Tyler's problems or Patricia's ongoing manipulation. Patricia's reaction was immediate and predictable. She accused me of holding grudges, of being heartless toward a stepbrother who needed help, of using my father's illness as an opportunity to be cruel and vindictive. She could not understand that my refusal to enable Tyler's behavior was not about punishment but about healthy boundaries and self-preservation. In her mind, family meant unlimited obligation, regardless of how badly someone treated you. The most satisfying moment of the entire confrontation came when I was able to demonstrate through my actions and choices that Patricia's ultimatum had backfired completely. She had gambled that forcing me to choose between my education and Tyler's legal problems would result in my submission to her authority and my acceptance of a diminished role in the family hierarchy. Instead, her ultimatum had freed me to build a life far better than anything I could have achieved while remaining under her influence. I left the hospital that day with a clear understanding of what kind of relationship, if any, was possible with Marcus going forward. I was willing to maintain limited contact based on mutual respect and genuine affection, but only if he was prepared to accept that I would not tolerate any manipulation or pressure regarding Patricia and Tyler. My new family, my wife and unborn son, would always be my priority, and I would not allow toxic people to threaten the peace and happiness we had built together. Marcus has called several times since that hospital visit, and we have begun the slow process of rebuilding some form of connection. It will never be the same as what we had before Patricia entered our lives, but it might be something worth maintaining if he can respect the boundaries I have established. Amanda has been incredibly supportive of this process, while also helping me stay grounded in reality about what is and is not possible with people who have shown their true priorities under pressure. The healing journey over these 8 years taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to walk away from relationships that are fundamentally unhealthy. I learned to value people who support my dreams rather than seeing them as obstacles to their own happiness. I discovered that real family members do not give you ultimatums that force you to choose between your future and their approval. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness does not require reconciliation, and that you can let go of anger without allowing toxic people back into your life. I am not bitter about what happened, because that bitterness would only hurt me and my new family. Instead, I am grateful for the lessons learned and the strength gained through surviving and thriving after losing everything I thought I needed to be happy. Looking back now, I can see that Patricia's ultimatum was actually a gift, though certainly not one she intended to give. It forced me to discover my own strength to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect and to create the kind of family environment I want my son to grow up in. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up being the catalyst for the best things that follow, and sometimes walking away is the only way to walk toward the life you were meant to live. Have you ever faced a situation where family members tried to manipulate you into sacrificing your dreams for their priorities? How did you handle it, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I would love to hear your stories and learn from your experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose your own happiness over other people's expectations. Do not forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and building the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that you are worth fighting for even when the people who should support you choose not to. May you find the courage to build the family and life that truly serves your highest good.